Feel right not having a scarf on right now. This will be Tuesday, February 4th. We'll continue going over our Olympian children and give more of them to them. Yay! With this, we're going to go over it twice. Once again, we're going to try and do the repetition, beating it into you. So we'll do it once, going over it, giving you the answers, and then we'll do it a second time without you guys being able to see the screen and move to the side so you can come in behind you. There you go. I can sense them coming. I have skills. So have this open on the Olympian memo list, but then take your blue sheet and put it on top of it so that you can't see it. And that way we're going to try and help you be as smartical as possible. As we go through, you don't have to say the hand sign, you just have to do the hand sign. The other parts that you're more than welcome to say. The first god to get a throne on Mount Olympus was Zeus. That's where Zeus comes in. What do we say for Zeus? And then you can do either King of all gods or God of all gods, either one. And then once again, you don't have to say the hand motions, you just do it. If you do say the hand motions, then that's where I have to get all mean and grumpy with you. And I don't want to be mean and grumpy because my heart's full of love. It's hard for me to say, too. The first person Zeus gives a throne to is Hera.
God of marriage and childhood, brains and heart.
There you go. Queen of all of the gods. That's the little crown, feeling all special. And then the next one to get a throne after Hera.
Poseidon.
And he is the
King of the ocean.
The ocean. Some good swimmering. The next one to get a throne is
Hades.
Hades. Why is he not listed?
Because he doesn't like you.
He's antisocial, doesn't like people like me. And then the next one to get a throne and keep it.
Demeter.
That's Demeter. And she's the god of
Queen of
grains and harvest. The grains and harvest, and then for next one. You laugh first, my friend. And the next one to get a throne after that one. She's not up there because
she gives it up for another
she gets it, keeps it, but 1,000 years later she gives it up. And that's the story we'll get to tomorrow, is her giving up the throne. And then we got to two more who got thrones and kept them. Two brothers, and that would be Hephaestus and Ares. And with Hephaestus, what was Hephaestus the god of? Metalworking and smithing. Where did he learn it from? Cyclops. And part of that story we find out he's the only god that is nicely done. And then our good hand sign on that one. I think the playing rock, paper, scissors and losing. And then for Ares, he was the god of war, specifically bully, wussy war.
No, got him.
And then that's the whole.
What spider stance?
Nicely done.
Defending yourself stance.
We will get into our next ones in just a moment. We're going to go through it one more time to make sure, without being able to see anything, and see if that helps you out. As we go through here, you can either be loud and correct, or wrong and quiet. Because if you're loud and wrong, I get to charge you points. So don't yell out the action, just the god, what they're the god of. So the first one is
King of all gods.
Nicely done. Nicely done. That was what we said?
Poseidon. King of water. King of retarded swimming.
And then you have
Retarded swimming. That was intense.
At this point, Zeus has filled in how many thrones? 7. Those 6 plus Hestia makes 7. And he's run out of his own kids he wants to give thrones to. He has Hebe and Alithia, but he doesn't want to give thrones to them because he has issues, and apparently so do they. So because of that, he starts having kids with people that aren't his wife. He ends up having hundreds and then thousands of children with all of these other friends of his. But most of them he does not think are worthy of a throne. Just because they're his child doesn't mean they get a throne. So as it goes along and he keeps trying to find the right kids to get thrones, Hera gets upset. And Hera starts figuring out every time that he's friends with someone, it makes her mad. So she starts going out and torturing anyone who becomes friendly with Zeus. If she finds out that someone was friends with Zeus and it was a human, she kills him. And if it was a Titan, she'll torture her, depending on which person it is. So women start to avoid Zeus as best they can. Zeus doesn't give up, sticks with it. So a couple of years go by. And as the years progress, Zeus finds himself a girl by the name of Leto, L-E-T-O, a Titan girl. And he really wants to be friends with her because he thinks she's really attractive. So he sees her, he walking down the road one day, and he walks up and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" He's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm Zeus." She goes, "Ah!" and runs. He's like, that didn't work out very well. So he bides his time and then waits so he gets a chance to come up and talk to her again. He's like, "Hey, Zeus, why'd you run?" He's like, "I thought we could hang out." He's like, "No. Every time someone's friends with you, your wife comes down and kills them or tortures them. And I have a strict not being tortured policy. So because of that, we're not going to get a chance to hang out." Zeus doesn't give up. So as she walks away, he decides to go into creeper mode. So he starts creeping after her, stalking her. As she goes walking around, he goes around behind trees, and he keeps watching her, goes into like a little bush, and like keeps peeking at her and watching her. She does stuff until eventually he haunts and creeps her until she goes swimming. Out swimming one day, he sees her splashing around in this lake pond area, and while she's out there, he's busy, creeping after and watching her. He sees her trying to play with a bunch of swans, the big white duck-like creatures, and she's out there, "Come here, swan, swan, swan." And the swan's like, they put like the wing in there, like, "Whatever, lady," and they just completely ignore her, and she gets upset because the swans won't come near her. And she says, "Hey, come on, swans. I wish just one of you would come play with me. Come on, swans." And they don't. So Zeus goes, and decides to take the form of a swan and go after her. And so he goes and takes his arms, he goes, and turns into a swan form back in the little bush tree area, and then flies out, swan, 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 and flies out onto the little pond, lands out there, wiggles his little swan bottom, and then goes around on the little lake, playing hard to get it first, as you do when you're Zeus, and that's when Leto sees him. Leto's like, "Hey, you're a big, pretty swan. You want to come over here and play?" And the swan comes over to her. She's like, "Are you a friendly swan?" The swan's like, "Hehehe." She's like, "That was a creepy laugh for a swan." And the swan comes over, and they start playing together. She pets the swan on the head. And the swan's like, "Purr." It purrs, "Swan, swan." That's how swans purr. And they're hanging out. She plays fetch with the swan, throws a frog, and he goes after it and brings it back. It's all kinds of fun. She eventually goes surfing on the back of the swan, around the lake, and flaps his wings, woo, and has a good time. Rides on the back of it, takes off her cowboy hat, and wings it. They spend the whole afternoon playing together, as you do when you find a giant swan. Until evening comes around, and talking to the swan, she's like, "Swan, I'm going to have to go home now, you're going to have to leave. I'm sorry we can't stay together. If you were a person, then we could be together all the time, and I love you so much, but you're not. You're just a swan. I wish you were a person so I could love you." And the swan goes, and takes its wings and goes, and turns back into a human form. And it's Zeus. He lands, all of a sudden she lands inside of his arms. He's like, "How you doing?" She's like, "Oh my God, were you Zeus the entire time?" He goes, Yes, I was." She goes, "I love you, Zeus." And they're friendly. At this time, she gets pregnant from the friendliness. So with her being pregnant, soon after, Hera finds out about it, because that's what Hera does, and Hera confronts Zeus. She's like, "Hey, did you make a new friend?" And he's like, "Yeah, what are you going to do about it?" She's like, "Oh, I'm going to do this. So Hera goes down to find Leto. Hera creeps up on her and finds her walking down the road one day. She's like, hey, are you Leto? Leto's like, yeah, why? Hera goes, I'm Hera. Leto's like, ah! Tries to run. Hera grabs her from the back, like, get back here, and pulls her back. And Leto goes, it wasn't my fault. Hera goes, were you friends with my husband? She goes, yeah, but he was a swan. Hera goes, what was that again? She goes, it was a swan. It was really weird. And Hera's like, that's just creepy. And so at this point, Hera decides she's going to torture Leto. Leto goes, what are you going to do to me? Hera goes, this. Because you were friendly with my husband, what I'm going to do is say, as long as you are in his kingdom, you will never be able to stop running. As long as you are in his realm and your feet are touching his land, you can never stop running. Leto's like, how are you going to make me keep running? Can I just stand still? She goes, well, because of that. And Leto turns around, and out of the ground, a huge hole opens, and out comes a gigantic snake called Python. It was the size of like 6 city buses. He was like, rah! Lands on the ground. And Leto's like, and takes off running. And the snake goes, snake! And takes off after her. And it starts snaking along, and she runs around screaming, and Hera just claps, and off it goes. Because she's a Titan, she doesn't have to stop running for anything. And she keeps running for days. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, years into decades of her never stopping running. Problem is, she's pregnant, and she can't stop to have her baby. So she keeps running, even though she's pregnant. And she just gets pregnanter and pregnanter and pregnanter, and she's and she's running, and the belly's just going back and forth, and she's upset. She's yelling at Zeus as she's running, and every time she runs by Mount Olympus, she's like, I hate you so much, Zeus. He's like, what was that? No, I hate you too. She's like, no, that's not... You're just a horrible man. He's like, what was that? You want a van? And so every time she goes by, they're yelling back and forth. Years go by. Zeus begins to feel a little guilty. He's like, kind of feel responsible for that. So he decides he should do something to help her out. So he comes up with a plan. He goes and talks to his brother. His brother lives in water, and that would be Poseidon, who lives in water. And he goes and says, hey, I'm going to need this girl to go from my kingdom to your kingdom. So he comes up with a plan. He sends a message down to her. He says, what's going to happen is, as you're running along, I'm going to have you jump from the land onto an island. And everyone knows that an island is just a floating bobber connected to the ground via a land string. So once she jumps onto this island, we're going to cut that string, and now it just floats there. The curse will be broken, and she'll be free and clear. Poseidon's like, all right, sounds like a good deal. This would be Leto. I couldn't find a picture of a pregnant woman running. So use your imagination. This would be Leto right there. She just looks really thin. And I couldn't find a picture of a snake running, so use your imagination. So that would be Python, the snake chasing after her. So she's running along, and she gets the plan. She's like, okay, good plan. I still hate you. So she's like, I accept that. So she runs till she gets to the very edge, and then like she's doing the long jump. She's like, yeah, and she jumps as far as she can, yeah, onto the island. The snake comes slithering right after her. Right before the snake can make the jump, his brother comes up and does his little shimmy, shimmy, shake, and separates the little thing. Now, this land is no longer connected to the ground. It is no longer part of Zeus's domain. Now, it is part of Poseidon's domain. So as soon as that happens, the snake loses track of her. It's cut, and all of a sudden the snake's like, and it can't find her. She's like, snake, snake, oh, thing, and she gives birth. As soon as it stops, immediately fires out 2 full-grown people and gives birth to 2 gods. The 2 gods she gives birth to? Apollo and Artemis. Those 2 right there. Now, Apollo and Artemis, as soon as they're born, are really angry because they spent their entire childhoods and their teenage years and their young adult years in their mommy's tummy, which make most people really grumpy. So once they come out, they're like, I'm going to go kill me a snake! And they decide they're going to go kill a snake. So they immediately start using the trees on the island to make bows and arrows. Now, you're like, Mr. Brovicast, how do you make the string? Umbilical cord. And that was the thing. And they make that little bow and arrow, and they turn around, make these bows and arrows, and they start shooting the snake. I hate you so much, you stupid snake. And they shoot the snake full of arrows and kill Python. Hera sees all of this happen and actually feels a little twinge of guilt for one of the first times because she has a connection with them. She's like, I feel bad because you spent your entire childhood in your mother's tummy. I understand. I can forgive you. Why is it that Hera feels a connection to them?
Childbirth. She's a queen of childbirth.
Close. Yeah?
She was eaten by her dad.
The fact that she spent her whole childhood inside of her father's tummy, but she is also the goddess of childbirth. So she says, you know, you're being punished for something you didn't do. It was something your parent did. So because of that, she forgives Artemis Apollo and requests that they become Olympians. Zeus agrees. He's like, well, they are my kids. That's fine with me. So Artemis and Apollo officially become the next two gods on Mount Olympus. Artemis and Apollo. Now, because they were born at the same time, and because of what they represent, they were thought to be twins. And you have a picture of Apollo's, the one right here in that poster. Artemis, the poster over here. Back over here, you have Artemis and Apollo. Artemis there, Apollo there. The one here, that's Artemis on that side, Apollo there. What is it that they represent that would also make them twins? Sun and the moon. Because Apollo was the sun, Artemis was the moon. That was also why they were thought to be twins. Plus, in almost every picture, what do you see them holding?
A sun and a moon.
Bows and arrows. So that becomes sort of what they were known for. Bows and arrows, sun and the moon. For Artemis, that's the majority of what she's the god of. She was the god of the moon and hunting. She was also the god of unmarried women, but doesn't show up too much in stories. But mostly the god of the moon and the god of hunting. So that's what we'll give her. She was the god of the moon and hunting. That's her main area. For the hand sign that goes with it, much like Zeus, she's almost always striking the same pose. Not every time, but almost every single time. And there you go. You're going to break into your inner Katniss. Oh, the Olympian Games! Like the Hunger Games, but you kill fewer people. Because they're immortal. What you doing special?
Huh?
What you doing? Hopefully you're writing stuff down like a responsible person. Apollo, her brother, if she's the god of the moon, he's the god of the sun. Now with it, he's also the god of the bow and arrow, but it doesn't play as big of a role with him. He doesn't use his arrow nearly as much. He is the god of the sun, but he also eventually retires from it. And that'll be a story coming up next week, because it was a lot of work. His more important job is macking on ladies. It's not really a job. Trust me, it's exhausting macking on the women. And so because of that, that becomes his main thing. He was the most attractive of all of the gods. He was the hottest of the gods. Get hot? And so because of that, he was the one that had the best looks, had the best chiseled body. He was also the best at macking on the ladies. He became the god of anything that chicks like. Music, poetry, chiseled abs, good skin. He was the god of all of that. So for Apollo, we're going to say the god of the sun and hotties. Hotties.
Oh, and hotties?
Hotties. As in hot people?
Yes, he likes hot people.
Yes.
So he
And
can be the god of that? You can be the god of that?
apparently you can.
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for that, I figure the hand sign that goes along with the idea of any time that you're outside and it's hot and you're trying to cool off, or anytime you see that especially hot person and you're trying not to faint. Yes, it scares me how quickly you guys figured that one out. Mr. Willoughby, I do that all the time in the hallway. You see those guys hurting like air? So I understand.
No.
So you're going to fan yourself like you're hot.
No, I'm
Or you can just point to me. It's the same thing. That hurts that you laugh. From this point now, we have Artemis and Apollo added. Our next one that gets added, and we have to go back in time a little bit, until we get to the point where Kronos overthrows Uranus. When Kronos overthrows Uranus, he does the jumpy, jumpy, choppy, choppy thing. Every time he did the choppy, choppy, what happened? Chunks fell out of Uranus. What happened when these chunks hit the ground? They created creatures. One of these times, the chunk fell down and hit the ocean, and it formed a titan. And this titan remained in the ocean for years, just floating out there, just floaty, 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 throughout all of the Uranus-Kronos battles, between the Kronos and Zeus battles, during the whole big war, during all of that, between, she just floats out there until one day she's floating along in the water, an absolutely gorgeous hottie of all the hottie Titan girls, and she goes from the water to the land. As soon as her foot touches the sandy beach, she goes into another god's territory. And what god knows of her existence?
Zeus.
Zeus. Because where was she before?
In the water.
Which is whose territory?
Poseidon.
Poseidon. And Poseidon doesn't really care. He's not nearly as friendly as Zeus. But for Zeus, as soon as her foot touches the sand, Zeus is in the middle of a conversation like, yeah, yesterday I was walking down the street, then there's a hot girl somewhere. And he just takes off running. He's running, and runs down, and he's like, how you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm okay. And the girl he meets is Aphrodite. Now, Aphrodite, incredibly attractive, the hottest girl to ever exist as far as Greek mythology is concerned. But Zeus makes his one good choice. Well, he makes a few. One of the first big choices he makes, and realizes this girl's going to get into trouble. And he's like, bad things are going to happen. So because of that, he decides that he's not going to be friendly with her at all. That was a big step for him. But at the same time, he's like, you're really a lot of fun to look at, and I keep drooling as I stare at you. It's kind of embarrassing. So he goes, here's what we're going to do. Welcome to my land. I own everything. I would like for you to come back to my house and sit in a chair so I can stare at you all the time and drool. And he's like, I mean that in the least creepy way possible. And she's like, deal. And she agrees. So he brings her back and makes her one of the Olympians. The problem is, she's so attractive and so good looking, nothing gets done on Mount Olympus. Because while she's sitting in her chair, just combing her hair, all of the guys spend all their time just staring at her. And all of the girls spend the time staring at her doing the whole stabbing knife. And so because of that, Zeus realizes this isn't going to work. All the girls want to kill her because all the guys are spending all their time staring at her. So Zeus decides to solve this problem. We're going to go ahead and get her married. So Zeus goes, Aphrodite, good news for you. She's like, what's up? He's like, you are about to get married. She's like, yay. She's like, do I get to choose? He goes, no, I'm going to pick the person for you. She's like, oh. She goes, do I get to marry you? He's like, what? Me? No, I'm already married. I would never be with someone else. That'd be weird and wrong. And and then she says, can't marry Zeus. She's like, well, how about the guy over there with the starfish? He's like, juggling seahorses? She's like, no, you can't be with him because then I wouldn't get to see you all the time. She's like, how about the other guy with the dark fingernails and the eyeliner? I was like, no, you can't be with him because he doesn't like people. She's like, oh, ooh, the good-looking guy over there with like the shiny abs going on? She's like, no, you can't be friends with him because that'd make me feel sad. She's like, whoa, how about the guy that just stubbed his toe and started crying? It looks like he's really good looking. No, can't be friends with him. She's like, well, the only person left for me to be friends with is the crippled guy in the corner. There's no way you're going to make me be friends with the crippled guy in the... Oh. And Zeus goes, that's the one! And so who is it she gets to marry? Hephaestus. This is Zeus's apology to Hephaestus for the whole, hey, sorry for throwing you out of a window and crippling you for life. How would you like to marry a hot girl? And Hephaestus is like, Dad, okay! And he completely agrees to it. So Aphrodite and Hephaestus get married. Hephaestus, excited. Aphrodite, not excited. So Aphrodite decides to celebrate her marriage by immediately getting a boyfriend. And so the boyfriend that she chooses is someone that she thinks will make her husband as angry and grumpy as possible. It's the one person that Hephaestus hates the most in the world. And that would be Ares. Hephaestus hates his brother and thinks he's a horrible person, which is why she chooses to go out with him. In the picture over here, this is Aphrodite sitting down. She's married to Hephaestus, the other guy sitting down. But who is she staring lovingly into? Ares, the guy that's right there. And so that's why you see those two next to each other glaring lovingly at each other, yet she's married to this guy sitting next to him. The girl that's behind him right there is the nicest of all the gods. And who is the nicest of all the gods? Hestia. She was in there trying to help him out. The same reason over here above Nick. Here's Hephaestus. Who's Hephaestus married to? Aphrodite. Who's Aphrodite dating? Aries. So I put those three next to each other to try and help you out, so you can look up there and see it. It's also why I put Aphrodite up really high, because she was older than all of these gods. She came along before all of them, so I put her up higher. Aries is higher because I didn't want to cover the schedule to confuse you guys, so I was trying to be nice. So that's the reason Aries is higher up than the other ones. So with Aphrodite, what is she the god of?
Goddess of love.
One, she was the god of making, the god of love, and because she was so incredibly good looking, she was also the god of beauty. She's the god of love and beauty. To help us remember that she's the god of love and beauty, you take one hand and you point your thumb down, and then you curl the little fingers on top, and you take your other hand and you point your thumb down and curl the fingers, and when you bring them together, it makes a heart.
Can't you?
It's like that. Those of you who are fancy, you can instead do the single finger version, nicely done, and you can do the whole thing like that too if you want.
What?
It depends. It requires more skill. It makes a little heart that way too. If not, then you can just stick with the same one, like just do that. And it's like, mine goes out looking like a spider. Then don't do that one, and then just make the hand with your heart. If you're really confused, you can make a heart with your hands and just go heart, and we'll just know that you're special, because that's about how big your heart is. And we'll just know that you're a special child, and that's fine with me too. I've known that many of you are special for a while. At this time, Zeus has filled in. How many of the thrones?
10.
Nice.
Not 10.
You have those up there, plus Hestia, who still has a throne. The next throne that get filled in is a story that we've already introduced and talked about in the past. Oh, before I forget, up there in front of Apollo, the word Phoebus will show up every once in a while in Greek mythology. In Greek, the word Phoebus, the word means shiny. And why would they refer to him as shiny Apollo? Because he's the sun. And he wore lots of suntan lotion with his Ripley abs. And they look at him like, oh my god, look at it. Like, bing! Like that from his tummy. And so it was really impressed. They called him shiny Apollo. Sometimes for that name too. We'll get to our last stories tomorrow and finish out the rest from there. Swervo, did you want to hit the button to turn it off?
I want to do it. I'll do it.
Can I do it?
Come on.
Don't try and steal Swervo.
Can I do it?